So we Democrats are finding ourselves in kind of a tough position. How do we protect democracy when our opponents don't support it? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Reiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to give you the ammo you need to stand up to the MAGA BS. So I was struck last week by an article I read in the Washington Post titled, "With Democracy Under Attack, Democrats See a Firewall in States." Now, as always, I'll post a link to the articles down below. But what struck me about this article was, here we are talking about how we need to keep Democratic governors in office in key swing states. States like my home state of Michigan, for example, as well as Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, potentially, if Stacey Abrams is able to win there in the next election, which is certainly a possibility. Nevada. These are all states that are targeted by Republicans, and they certainly are swing states in the current environment. The problem is, what are the Democratic governors supposed to do if they find themselves in a situation that they need to validate a Republican win? Now, I know what they actually will do, which is that they will respect the process. Despite the claims by Josh Hawley that Democrats don't accept elections they lose, we saw what happens when Democrats are in charge in Virginia. You had a Democratic incumbent, Ralph Northam, who is unable to run for re-election. Running to replace him was former Governor Terry McAuliffe, who has a close relationship with Northam, and far-right MAGA candidate Glenn Youngkin. Well, of course, we know what happened. Despite the fact that Virginia has been trending Democratic over the past few years, right-wing Republican Glenn Youngkin pulled out a win. Now, the reasons for this are many, and I'm not going to revisit them. But what happened, of course, is that the Democrats simply handed over power to the Republicans. And this wasn't only true in the governor's office. This was also true in the attorney general's office, for example. Where leading up to the election, there were all sorts of claims that the Democrats were going to use the power in their hands to essentially block the peaceful transfer of power. Well, we know at this point that the only Republican who's blocked the peaceful transfer of power, of course, is Donald Trump. But he's really leading the charge among Republicans. I mean, we see another example who lost an election for Congress by 59 points in Florida, claiming that he didn't lose the election because, of course, Republicans now don't believe they need to concede at all. We saw this in California, where prior to the recall election, Larry Elder was saying that the Democrats were essentially going to steal the election, which, of course, again, didn't happen. Larry Elder just lost by a huge margin. So again, that brings me back to the conundrum we find ourselves in as Democrats. Democrats in power, let's say, end up, God forbid, and I'm going to knock on wood here, certifying a Republican win. That Republican win then empowers the Republicans to essentially destroy our democratic system, as we well know that they do. At a minimum, we know that they'll take steps to try to dilute the power of Democrats and oppressed minority groups so that essentially white males, despite their increasing status as a minority in this country, will be able to continue to have control over the levers of power in this country. So what are Democrats to do? I mean, there are columnists who are calling for Democrats to act more like Republicans. And to a certain extent, I agree with that. I wish we were a little more aggressive and a little more unified in our attacks against them. Sometimes I really can identify with a statement by Will Rogers that I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Democrat. So where does that leave us? Obviously, we as Democrats need to do everything we can to make sure that we win the 2022 election, not just retaining control of the House and the Senate in Washington, but also retaining control of these key governorships and hopefully making some progress in some of the legislative races as well. But beyond that, where does that leave our democracy? I wish I knew the answer to that because, frankly, that would help me sleep a lot better at night. So I'm looking to you. Please leave me comments. Tell me what you think. What should the Democrats do? We'll revisit this issue in future videos because obviously this is a key discussion we as Democrats need to have. How do you protect democracy when a key point of democracy is conceding when the other side wins? And yet, if we allow the other side to win, that essentially means the death of democracy. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe altogether we'll be able to figure it out. Well, to help prepare for this discussion, why don't you check out this other video that I did where I discussed the aftermath of the Virginia election. There were certain important lessons that came out of that we need to consider. as we decide upon our path going forward. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.